If you want to convince yourself that you're not insane, just surround yourself with insane people.
The last person on the planet to discover the cult is the person inside the cult.
If your dad is just beating the shit out of one of his kids,
got completely naked and went outside of the camp in the wintertime. Like, you can get a human to do anything. Where the fuck did we come from? It answers the biggest questions that all humans have. Is it steaks? Do we eat a certain kind of meat when you're a Mormon? They even tried to hide how babies came. You're gonna look so much alike in heaven. Babies did not come from a woman. She pushed that out of her vagina. One of the classes I took was a philosophy class.
I can just see how this all goes south, philosophy.
Oh, dude. This class was so cool because the entire semester was themed off of The Matrix.
I'm sure there are lots of parallels that you started to notice.
The Matrix was based on actually a really old story, Plato's allegory of the cave. There are these people inside of a cave, and they've been there their entire life. All of a sudden, on this wall in front of them, these shadows appear, and they make meaning as to what these shadows are, and it's everything that they just love it. Like when they see the shadows on their wall, they're like, this is heaven. Like they discuss it, they argue, like the shadows are their reality. One day, one of the people in Plato's story breaks loose from the chains, and he noticed that there's a back wall, and so he walks to the back of the cave and looks behind the wall, and he sees that the shadows are being created by someone holding up some shape in front of a flame. Everything in this person's life comes into question because the shadows that he thought were real are just a projection of something else. And then he sees a crack in the wall and climbs out and goes out of the cave. So let's say he saw a shadow of a tree, then he goes out and he sees a real tree. His mind is blown. Literally his entire identity and everything just became shattered because everything he thought he knew was not true. And it scared him. And after it scared him, he then was like, this is awesome. There's so much more to life. But I still have friends and family down there. They need to know about this. So he goes back to the cave. He can't see very well. He stumbles. And so people are like, hey, like, where have you been? And he's like, oh, let me tell you, like, there's this whole outside world that's crazy. And of course, they have no frame of reference. So what do they think? He's gone crazy. But what could be better than the shadows that we have? They ask him. Don't you understand what I'm trying to say? What I've seen, these shadows are nothing compared to what's real and what's out there. Now, they feel threatened. Well, what are you saying? Are you trying to take away our shadows? And so because they feel threatened, they kill him. After my professor tells us that story, I thought of everything I knew to be true. Holy shit. There wasn't a single thing, not a single thing that was like a core thing that I had internally discovered. It was from my dad, or the other priesthood leaders, the church. It was the first thing that was like what I call the crack, the thing that was so incredibly unsettling. I couldn't say for certain why what I believed was actually worth believing.
This is something that I feel like in my family it was always super awkward. And it's awkward for like everyone in general. So I want to know, what was like sex education like in the church? And did your parents give you the birds and the bees talk? What was that?
Zero.
Nothing at all?
In fact, I taught myself and my older sisters.
Oh, wow.
So we started going to the library and looking through, dude, my family was so against teaching anything about the birds and the bees that even though we were homeschooled, my mom would get biology books, okay? And when the books were delivered, she would go through the biology books and she would take a fucking Sharpie to the painted pictures of anatomy, and she would put clothes on the boys and the girls so that the breasts weren't showing and the penis wasn't showing. Like there was none from the parents.
So how did the girls figure out like what to do when they got their period?
I don't know. You'd have to ask my sisters for that. But I remember going to the library, getting health and medical books, blowing my own mind, and then teaching my older sisters, like, dude, check this out. Like, this is normal. Like, wow. There's a video. Man, it'd be so fun if I could find this video. But there's this video, like, of I just got a digital camera and I'm recording and I left it on. I'm like 19 years old and my cousins come into my bedroom and they just got back from the library. And this is kind of what spurred my discovery of sex education. They're like,
we just got back from the library and we read a health and medical book. And I was like, uh-huh. And they're like, we found out that it's okay to like masturbate. Like it doesn't make you go blind.
They thought that? What?
It gets worse.
Okay.
It doesn't make you go blind or anything. What's worse is on the camera, I have this as a recording. My reaction to that was like, no way. There's no way there's no way it's okay. There's no way it's not bad for you. And I was like, and on the camera I said, God's smarter than that. There's no way something that feels that good is like not horrible for you. And they're like, no, I'm telling you. And I didn't believe it so much that then I went to the library and looked at the books and was like, what? This is normal? Like this whole thing, like for freaking like years at that point, every time I did, I thought that I was being such a horrible person, that it was my deep, dark secret. Mm-hmm. And then like we had all these stories that my cousins around my same age, we all thought that it was like gonna make you have, that you're gonna grow hair on your palms, that it's gonna make you go blind, all that stuff. Like we had no honest, true education around it. And it wasn't until I was like 19 where my cousins came in. I need to find that video. It's hilarious.
But if you had no education on it, why did you think it would make you go blind? You just made that up in your head?
No, that's what I was told by my older cousins.
Oh.
Yeah.
What?
Like old folklore that it's like horrible and that it's bad. It's like so no education from the parents whatsoever. In fact, They even tried to hide how babies came. Babies did not come from a woman.
What the?
They came from an angel. So we almost have to pretend that woman's belly is getting big. I did not know how babies were born until I watched a Simpsons episode and Marge is delivering a baby. And I'm like, whoa, she's at a hospital? What? She pushed that out of her vagina? Like, it blew my mind.
So crazy though.
Yeah, it was never talked about. Yeah, never talked about. And then, like, I literally, till I was 19 years old, I thought I was the only person on the planet that masturbated.
What? Really?
That there's no way that this is something everybody does. Like maybe some of my other brothers did, but we even kept it from each other. And what really blew my mind is around the same time, I watched a Seinfeld episode where they're talking about it. Like there's this whole episode where they all make a bet to see who can go the longest without masturbating. And I'm like, what? It's that normal. Like I can't even describe to you. Like it was so never talked about that I was like, nobody does this. Nobody does this.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. In the Mormon church, like you are very much shamed if you masturbate. There are these camps that men go to and pay, like their family pays like 40 grand for them to go to this ranch for like 90 days to try to break them of masturbating.
No way.
No, for real.
Really? So like a rehab center?
Yeah,
for
and
that?
they call it sex addiction.
Whoa.
And it's not even like you start talking, like I've had conversations with Mormon dudes, and it's not a true sex addiction. They're normal. You masturbate once in a while. You're a fucking normal person. And they think that they're doing all this horrible thing, and so they literally go to like this LDS sponsored ranch for 90 days for a shitload of money to try to break their sex addiction of masturbating.
So then I would assume birth control is a huge no-no in your church, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You do. If you got caught as a couple, like that you're okay with birth control, then you're like super out of line.
Wow.
Yeah. Because why are we getting married?
To have kids?
And to multiply and replenish the earth. Like you're playing God. You're playing God and like flipping him off to put on a condom.
Interesting. Yeah, I kind of, because in my group, I thought that was the case, because they talk about like not having kids as being the worst thing ever, and like they would teach like birth control is like a very shameful thing. But I remember finding condoms in my dad's drawer, so I'm like, so there's got to be some sort of like, I don't know, with leniency, I guess, in the order where they're like, it's somewhat allowed, or I don't know if...
I think it's gotten more lenient in the work as time has gone on, but it was a hot debate for a long time where people would argue about it and be like, is it okay, is it not okay to use birth control? Like, it's so strange because anybody watching this, they're gonna feel like sex education is a thing. Like, be smart. use birth control, use safe sex, use a condom. In fundamentalist Mormonism, it's literally shamed to use a condom.
Oh yeah.
Like, because you're making so you can't have kids and stuff like that. It's almost treated as like like an abortion before it happens. Like you're trying to control, you're trying to play God. Like, don't have sex then or whatever. Like, but don't put a condom on. It's so strange.
Wow.
But it's just normal when you're in it.
Yeah, it's funny to look at it now, but at the time it was like such a big deal.
Yeah. So if I ever had to interact with an outsider, told them that I was like a regular Mormon, like not a polygamous Mormon, like
just the mainstream LDS members.
Yeah, like we were so secretive. Like we were taught, like if there was a car coming down the street when I was a kid, like run and hide behind a bush or go in the house, because we didn't want them to know how many kids were in our yard. Like we were super secretive. I did not interact with a lot of outsiders throughout most of my upbringing.
Dang.
Like everybody that I knew was either in the work, and like 90% of the people I knew by the time I was 19 had the last name Wayman. And so we stuck to ourselves most of the time. But yeah, it would be a little awkward, because I would say, I'm a Mormon or whatever, and then they would ask questions like, oh cool, what ward are you from? I'm like, oh shit. I don't know. Like they're saying things I don't like fully mean, like, oh, just the one down, on this street, and like, oh cool, do you go to this other like church functions? And I have no idea what they're talking about, and so I'm just trying to get out of it. I'm like, well, I mostly just go to church, that's all, and stuff like that. Oh cool, like who was your bishop? Like, frick.
And a lot of people might be confused by this, but here in Utah, it's like very common that even strangers will talk about religion. I don't know why.
It's like,
it's
dude,
very common.
It's almost like if you're in college, if you meet anybody in college, a common line of questioning is like, are you a freshman or are you a senior or whatever? Like, what year are you? And then the next question is, what's your major? Like that same talk in Utah is like, what ward do you go to? Like, where'd you grow up? Oh, cool. Who's your bishop? What's your family's last name? Like that same line of talk.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's funny. I feel like that was very similar to me. Like the first time I ever heard of, like, they asked me what stake you're in, I was like, why are they talking about food or talking about religion?
Exactly.
It's so confusing.
I remember that too. Why are they talking about steaks? Why is it steaks? Do we eat a certain kind of meat when you're a Mormon?
Yeah, and one of the people that talked to me was my neighbor. So like, I was theoretically, if I was LDS, I would go to the same building as them, because it's by area. And so when I was like, oh, I go to the one over in like Salt Lake or some random city, and they were like, what? But you live right here.
You kind of hit it too.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because we would even sometimes go as far as say that we are Jack Mormon. I remember because like I would first say I'm Mormon, and then they would ask questions.
That's what we ended up saying.
Yeah, if you say you're Jack Mormon, they would be like, oh, okay. Yeah, leave it at that.
I didn't even know why that worked, but I remember getting caught a few times, and then some of my older siblings were like, dude, just say you're a Jack Mormon. So that way, and my understanding back then was like, you're just kind of Mormon, but maybe you don't go to all the functions.
Exactly.
And so then they would kind of leave you alone.
Yeah.
A little bit. And I was like, okay, I'm a Jack Mormon.
Yeah. I even, in our family, I distinctly remember missionaries coming over, and I don't know why, but my mom, I guess her curiosity, she would have them come in and teach lessons and stuff. And I remember thinking it was like super interesting.
My dad did that too.
Everything.
But secretly, I think we were trying to convert them.
Oh, okay.
To like show them the way that your church did away with polygamy, and it was obviously wrong that they did, and Joseph Smith that founded this church like would be very much ashamed of what you've done, but we're still got it, it's still alive. Like that's the big lesson. Like I was just at a funeral, and the church leaders get up at funerals, and because it brings in a lot of people that are not a part of the work anymore, and they always
relatives.
Yeah, and they bring up we're the right one. And like there are blessings available to you. Just come submit yourself to us, and we can give you the blessings from God.
What about some of the like extreme crazy things that happen in your group? Because like, for example, there's one thing I'll never forget is hearing that somebody like before they were married, they had slept together, like people, like members in the order, and then the girl got pregnant, and that was like a huge no-no. And most of the time, they would just get married really quickly, and that solved the problem. But she was not supposed to marry that guy. Like they could not arrange that, so she got married to someone else because he like wasn't in the right bloodline or something. Like they were only together in secret, like snuck out, and she got pregnant, and they were like furious. And I guess, yeah, most of the time they were just having to get married, but in this instance, they didn't. And she had to marry who she was assigned to, she was supposed to marry. And so they never talked about that affair, and they just pretended that kid was the person she married.
No way.
Kid. Yeah. And so things like that. Like, were there any crazy or absurd things that happened in your group? What were some of them?
Some of them are hearsay, but I know something like that has happened. Where extramarital affairs, almost like a swinger situation, but not really. But like a woman got pregnant by her husband's brother. Everybody just pretended that it was like not that.
So that didn't happen? Okay.
Yeah. Like they were married. And the guy was married and they freaking had a baby together. Except everybody knows that the dad is actually
the other person.
The other one. And you can tell it's obvious with how the kid looks. I mean, there's all sorts of strange things, man. Like, just the way people get married. I mean, I told a funny story on Amanda's podcast where, like, I got given the wrong name. Like, that was, like, when I was...
Oh, yeah, when they told you who you were supposed to marry, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, John Timpson, the top leader, like, he mixed up the name. And so that was funny. But there's also just weird stuff that I, like... This question would be way better for my sisters, because my sisters are like have the pulse on all the strangeness and like the gossip that happens, and I'm more of the personality that's like, I'm gonna live my life, and so I try to remove it. So
and that makes it easier to stay in, because when you just ignore all the bad, then you don't have as many reasons to like question.
And I saw strange things that were like within my own like family and upbringing, but I very much tried to stay out of the strangeness that was happening with other people. That type of stuff has happened in fundamentalist Mormonism all the time.
Really?
Warren Jeffs married his dad's wives when Roland Jeffs died.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So he married a lot of his moms.
Dang.
It's fun. Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. And then the Green guy, Tom Green, he married a girl that already had a daughter, and then he ended up marrying that daughter.
Yeah, so that happened. That's happening right now too in the work. So one of the church leaders is married to the mother and the daughter.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've also heard, I don't know if this is true, but you have to go through this huge process to like get permission for certain things from the prophet, right? And there was one person that put in a question or whatever of, can you marry your own daughter, like one of your own daughters? Because, you know, they married sisters, they married all these things, yeah. And he had one of his daughters that he was really close to, and so he was wondering if he could get permission to marry his own daughter.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
And did he get it? What was his answer?
It was denied, thank God, but I don't know what made him even ask that question.
But I think there's some story, either in the Bible or the Book of Mormon, where some dude married his daughters. In like a cave. Yeah, like the Bible or the Book of Mormon.
I have heard a story where the daughter slept with their father to give him seed or something. Well, isn't that the story with Noah? Because there's no one, like, you know, the world was being repopulated or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So there's really weird stuff that, like the way people use scripture to justify crazy behavior, like a big thing that was talked about a lot in fundamentalist Mormonism, especially with marrying young girls, was they would always look at Mary and say, God impregnated Mary when she was only like 14. However old she is. She was like 13 or 14 in the story. And so they would make that like, it's only society that makes it bad to marry young. And so they try to really normalize. Like this, thankfully, it's not my generation is bad, but like one or two generations back, getting married at 15 or 14 or 16, or in Warren Jeff's case, 12, like was common.
Well, that's the thing. In the order, that is still common because there's such a fight over the women. You know, there's so many boys that they are going younger and younger because they're running out of women. So they're allowing younger and younger marriages because all the girls that they have right now are basically infants. And sometimes there's even been instances where really high, like, I guess like close to the prophet related people want a certain amount of wives, I guess. So they will assign an infant baby girl to be their wife once they're old enough.
That's insane. I've heard, like, here's some weird twisted shit. There's stories that are like celebrated within the work. Like that these old dudes that were like prophets, like open the bedroom or like open somebody's house and they see a 6-year-old and they knew that's gonna be my
No
wife.
way.
And the 6-year-old, who's now an old woman, like I knew it too, and I knew that's who I was gonna marry. And
There's
they end up doing
similar stories to that in the order
and
too.
they talk
Oh
about
my
like that
gosh.
that it's great, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
and that God gave me the impression it's like, no, that's weird, that's fucked up.
No, yeah, the order has one like that that's even weirder because there was this old man delivering a baby girl, and he held the baby when it was
This is gonna be
delivered.
my wife.
And he did.
Oh
They
my-
got married,
and
and
they got
they
married.
tell this story like
Dude.
it's the greatest thing in the world. It was
That's
so messed
so fucked up.
Oh
How many
gosh.
members are in the order?
There's roughly 10,000. That's what we've estimated.
That's
so.
still a pretty big group. I think.
Mhm, but I'm pretty sure well over 50% are like little kids, you know, because it's mostly babies that have.
Yeah.
I feel like, but yeah, it's slowly growing, but it grows by the babies that they have. But like, rarely do people join, and
Yeah.
way more people leave every year than people that join it. So
Yeah.
it's slowly
The attrition
going
rate
away.
is like the balance between people leaving and how many babies can you have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who's gonna be the next leader after Paul?
So that's the thing. It's definitely going to be one of Paul's kids because there's always some bloodline thing or whatever. It's a debate because they're talking about there's 3 of his main kids that all basically think they're going to be the prophet, right? And there's word about them kind of having it split into 3 parts. So one of them's probably going to be the main prophet, I would assume, because you know they're the one that received revelation. But then he's going to have his 2 top counselors, which will be the
What do you
brothers.
mean he receives revelation? What did you mean by that?
Well, like the prophet, like you can't have 3 prophets, you know. Even though it's weird because when they are talking about when Paul dies, it almost sounds like they're gonna have 3 leaders replace him, but it's just can't
I'm
work that
so
way.
curious
One
to see
has
how
to be the
it
prophet.
goes.
you
I'm
know?
so curious how the order's gonna go. I'm curious how the work's gonna go.
Yeah. Is it similar with yours? In the order, every time there's one of the prophets die, there's like almost a break off. Some of the people
well,
leave.
That definitely happens. But the thing that's unique is, again, everything that separates all these different fundamentalist groups, the key distinction, like there's so many things that are the same. Like belief in polygamy, like Joseph Smith, the Mormon doctrines, all those are so similar. The one thing that is different in all of them is how they view leadership and who's in charge. So yours is kind of like a bloodline thing, right?
Yeah, the blood is huge.
Yeah, so some have that, some have, like in Warren Jeff's FLDS, it's like whoever the prophet says is next in line. In the work, it's all about, it's called order of seniority. So when the person was called, so when the apostle received it, whoever received it first is next in line. So right now, John Timpson's the leader, but if he died today, then we know instantly who the next in line is. It's Claude Colley.
Oh,
so he's
there
it.
you go.
And if Claude Colley and John Timpson dies, then it's Jed Hammond, and then Joseph Knudsen. Like,
Wow.
And then Richard Timpson, and then Ephraim Hammond. Like those are the church
So there's
leaders
not
of
a
life.
fight for leadership. They know exactly who
Yeah,
it is.
yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah,
that
smart,
makes
right?
way more
It's like-
sense. for
yeah,
sure.
so it's like a better, it's like an elevated, what's the word? Like it adapted. It's like adapt a little bit. But I am very curious because this is really the first generation of the work, and this is something that is so interesting worth pointing out. It's the first generation of the work, but when you're in it, it feels like it's been going on forever. Like because of how they talk about it. It's like
they talk about it like it's an eternal thing,
and that
so
it's been going on since Jesus. It was not until way later, right before I left, where I realized, wait a minute, this has only been around since I was a baby. Like it was once the same church with Warrens and it split off. Whoa, I didn't know that. And then I'm realizing, but the way but even how they talk about it, they're like, we've been around forever, but then there was a split. But they all talk about it like everybody else split from us. Like here's us, we've been around forever, and then the Mormon Church split away from us. Like not that fundamentalist Mormonism started and then it created a couple groups that ultimately led to ours. Like when you're in it, it's like we've been around since Jesus.
it makes me think of that how way back in the day we thought the universe revolved around the earth.
Exactly.
And the sun went around the earth. It's like we are all that matters.
People still believe that, and like smart people, relatively smart people that I grew up with, like they literally think that we're the only reason the earth is not destroyed. Like,
wow.
I mentioned this on Amanda's podcast. One of the things that I love so much that I've enjoyed is developing this this awareness of my own insignificance and even the insignificance of Mormonism itself, because when you're around it so much, it's like life. But there are people in my community that truly think that Joseph Smith is the greatest person in the history of all humans outside of like Gandhi and like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, like anybody that was like a historical figure. They think Joseph Smith is the most important historical figure in all of America.
Even more so than the living prophet today?
Yeah.
Really?
They think Joseph Smith is one of the, it goes God, Jesus, Joseph Smith. Like they call it, like that's the true Trinity, is God, Jesus, Joseph Smith. And they also, but this is what I'm saying, they, as much as we know how big, like there are these like true figures that have affected America, like Martin Luther King, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, like the founding fathers, like they believe in their soul that Joseph Smith has like impacted the world more than all of those.
Whoa.
And it's not until like you leave it and you talk to somebody who don't even know his name, and it's like, whoa. But when you're hearing it every day, every week in church, you're like, this guy sounds fucking amazing. So
yeah, that's the one thing that I think is a little bit different, because I feel like in the order they talk about how like the prophets are great and they have their roles, but what trumps all of those is the living prophet. Like let's say a previous prophet said some commandment. If the living prophet says something that might contradict that, the living prophet trumps that. And so it's kind of their way of being like, if maybe there's a teaching that was not thought out well in the past, they can like rewrite that and fix it now.
We take that in the exact opposite.
Oh, really?
And the reason it's important is because like that's the reason the work exists, because our history, like the LDS Church, has that same belief, and they have changed doctrine, and so they are very much proud on the fact, and they would hate if they heard me using that word because they're so against pride, but they are proud of the fact that they have kept it the same. Like that's what they preach over the pulpit, is like, we're the same, we're since Joseph Smith, we're the same since blah blah blah. The God does not change. He is the same today, tomorrow, and forever. If polygamy ever was a celestial principle, it will always be a celestial principle. It will never go away.
Wow.
There's this like revelation that never happened, but people pretend it does in the work about God coming and saying that like you men should keep on living it, when the LDS Church was breaking away from it. And so yeah, the work takes pride in the fact that it hasn't changed.
Interesting.
Any of the doctrine, and that's like, it's where it gets its authority, in the fact that it doesn't change. That's
crazy, because in the order they never had the sacrament until like 2016 is when they finally implemented partaking of the sacrament. And so I think it's just because they, there's certain things that they don't pay attention to or haven't caught on to, and then they're like now thinking like, oh, maybe we should do that, and they're implementing it. So I don't know, it's just interesting how they do that. But I just think of it as, since it's ran by just like greedy people and it's more of a business than a religion, they really just implement things if it will help them, or if it's like needed to like, I don't know, control the people better or something.
Do you think there's anybody in there in the leadership that actually think that they're doing awesome things? Or do you think that they're just being manipulative?
I think at least Paul himself has convinced himself, because here's the thing. If anyone tells him that he's not like speaking for God, he cuts them out of his life. He is literally surrounded by people that are praising him, bowing down to him, worshiping him. And so I think mentally he's put himself in a situation that it's basically tricked him into thinking that
totally
he is
agree
what
with that.
he is.
I think that's the same type of thing that Joseph Smith ended up doing, cutting people off that didn't agree with him. It ultimately led to his demise. Like somebody, like, which was a big serious offense in America at that point. Like he destroyed the printing press because of some paper that somebody was talking against him. It was like, I'm gonna use my governmental power, because he was a governor or whatever. And so that's dangerous, and that's also what happens in the work, where the leadership has no accountability. There's nobody except regular humans like us on the internet that's willing to talk about it. There's nobody that votes. Like, it's the most anti-American thing I can think of, because in America, we believe in the individual. We believe that we can our voice matters, and we can vote who the
freedom of speech too.
Yes, freedom of speech, and if we don't like who's in power, we can trade them out. It's the exact opposite in the work. In the work, it's like the priesthood leaders are in power. Everybody does what you tell them to do. You do what the leaders say, and it doesn't matter if you like them or not. And there's nobody to hold them accountable if they cross the line,
Exactly.
except Jesus.
I want to get your reasoning of why these groups are, first of all, so dangerous, and what is it that they do that is so like harmful to its members and even just to the society that they are in. What would you say is your biggest concern about these groups?
That's a good question. I think, to be fair, I'm going to go the exact opposite for a second, because some people wonder, why do these things exist and why do they perpetuate? The things we haven't talked about at all is that there's also good stuff in all of them. In that it has the family aspect, it has this community aspect. Like, it has all these strange beliefs, but for the most part, you're just living your day-to-day life with people that you love. Like, that's the majority of it, and that's how it continues.
And in a strange way, they do kind of give their members purpose almost.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Being in a religion like a fundamentalist faith gives you purpose. It answers the biggest questions that all humans have. What are the big questions? Where the fuck did we come from? How did we get here? What are we doing here? And where are we going? Like, those big questions are answered, and there's so much comfort in. There's this whole story in all the Mormon faiths of the pre-existence, and that we came here to get a body, and that we're here to learn and to grow, and that if we keep on growing, we could someday be a god. So there's all those things that feel like you have belonging. Now, here's my concern. Everything that, when you're in the cult, that you think is unique to that religion, what I've learned is really just a common thing that every human group has. For example, purpose. You don't, like, it's not unique to have purpose to that, but they kind of hijack it and say, this is what your purpose is. If you've ever had this feeling of intuition, where you're like, I have this gut feel of what I should do. Like, everybody's had that, right? But in the work and other fundamentalist faiths, when you have that, they're like, that's the Spirit of God, or that's the Holy Ghost. Like, they use their own narrative to explain it. And so I think the danger in all of that is ultimately a stripping away of the individual and it blending into the group. And I think that's where things just in human society can start to get scary. The thing that I think is unique about this whole this whole American experiment. America has been around relatively short in human history, but one of the things that makes America unique is this celebration of the individual, that you have a voice, that you matter. And that is lost. It is frowned on. It is like, it's extreme in some parts more than others. Like, some people say that we're going to look so much alike in heaven because your complexion changes. When you become more like God, you look more like God. And I can't think of anything worse. Like, if everybody looks the same and is the same and stuff like that. But that's what starts to happen.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's very dangerous. And so, of course, in that, there's all this reward and punishment going on. So you're afraid to exercise your individuality because you don't want to mess up and lose your salvation. And so you get more and more submissive over time. And that's the thing, is over time, like, you can get a human to do anything.
Especially if you raise them from the moment they are born and know nothing at all, and you convince them and condition them to be exactly what you want them to be. And I feel like that's very dangerous, for sure.
It's so dangerous, and that's why it's impossibly difficult to go against your social surroundings in anything. Like, that's why I have so much respect for anybody that, comes out of the closet to tell their conservative family that they're gay, or decides to do something that the rest of society shuns, because I know what that feels like. Like, to wake up like I might be this white dude and like I have certain privileges for that, but at the same time I had so much social pressure that I like to step out of line. Like the best analogy I can come with, what it felt like to decide to leave, it felt like I got completely naked and went outside of the camp in the wintertime. That's what it felt like. Like you're out of the camp, you're exposed, like can you even survive? Some very dangerous things in the killing of the individual, because you can start to control people and people don't realize it. Like they don't realize it so much that they'll spend their day talking about the media or the government controlling them, when the media or the government is like controlling them like 1 or 2%, but their own religion and church leaders have full control of their life.
Yeah, I think from my experience, what I hate the most about the group that I come from is the unlimited authority that they just give around like it's just anything. Like they'll just give it to anyone that is in the place.
Really?
For like the law of one above another. So it's, for example, what's so frustrating to me is that there might be some things that they're
implementing. That law, by the way.
Yeah, the law of one above another is stupid because it's literally giving someone the control over certain
Somebody
people
else.
or certain groups,
Yeah.
whether they like are able to handle that, whether they've earned that respect of those people or anything. It's just, and it's oftentimes unchecked. If you are put over like a family or certain families, then there is nothing that family can do to basically check you, make sure you're not abusing your power or you're doing like more than like going crazy with control or things like that.
Can you have somebody be over a family that's not even like a
like their kids and stuff? Yeah. Like my dad,
Really?
his brother is the one above him. So technically,
What?
my dad has to conform to every will and want of his brother.
No.
His brother can basically fully control him, and if he doesn't, then he's the one that has the authority, and my dad can get in huge trouble from the group.
And
he
does
has
your
to do
dad
it.
have control over others?
Well, my dad's a unique situation. My dad, I don't know if I'm calling him the runt of the family is the right thing or something, but no, he's kind of like the younger sibling, and he's over his wives, of course, right? Because that's the chain of command, but he's not necessarily over any other families.
This is so interesting to just notice when you're outside of it. That you're like, look at all these like levers of control, and it becomes self-policing. Look at this. Like Paul, the prophet, doesn't even have to be everywhere now because there's this person that's making sure that they're doing the right thing. And this is the exact same thing that happens in the work and FLDS culture, where it turns into this self-policing thing where people are like spying on each other and making sure they're staying in line, and it's wild. We become like crabs in a bucket where we pull each other down if one tries to leave. I didn't know in the order though that you could have just somebody chosen to be above you, because we have that in the work.
Well, they claim it's because of their closeness to like being the higher numbered man or things like that, or like how close they are to the prophet himself. Because my dad's a brother to the prophet, but he's a half brother, and that's a huge difference. Because the full brothers to the prophet are the 7 top people. Like
really,
they get the most control. They have the most everything in the group,
and it's almost like the ancient royal family,
like kings and queens.
blood.
Yeah, it's so much like the old royalty life.
Yeah, and
it's like that.
And again, you can see why this perpetuates, because people use that language in the work too, where like you're like going to be the king over your kingdom, and they even talk about that with your family. This your wife is now going to be your queen, and this is your kingdom. I mean, as a man, you're like, that feels cool. Like I'm in charge. But in the work, it's all based on like, your dad is the connection, and then the church leaders are the connection. You don't have like, it can't be, I don't want to call yours random, but it can't be like that, where like a brother is over you.
Well, it just can't be unchecked. Like, maybe I didn't explain this very well, but like, if your dad is just beating the shit out of one of his kids, that kid, like, is not gonna have the person above my dad. He's not gonna come to that kid and be like, "Are you okay?" or like check on things. He's gonna go to the dad and be like, "Is everything okay?" And obviously, the dad's not gonna rat himself out, you know.
Totally.
So it's like they just give these people so much power that they can abuse it so easily.
You see why I call it anti-American? Because it's like the exact inverse. Like you're not letting the leader or the people vote. The church leaders are saying we're the ones in charge, and like over time, and people believe it. Like it gets to the place where, I mean, there's 10,000 members, and there's a lot of those are adults, and they probably feel lucky that they get to be a part of such a thing. Otherwise, why would they be a part of it, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's different for a lot. I think some people feel trapped. They're there by fear. Some people are there, you know, because they're in the leadership and they feel special, or, you know, they get benefits from being in it and stuff. I just think it's like the low end people are there maybe because they feel trapped, or sometimes they really feel like it's true, so they have to like postpone their eternal salvation to go through this horrible life that they're going through, you know?
Yeah, so that's the thing too, where you like sacrifice this life and then you're gonna have all these rewards. Is that a thing?
Oh yeah, so that's a huge motivator, and because it's like, first of all, it's the fear of going to hell for the rest of eternity, which is so long, and then it's like, why does 80 years matter when you're going to live for eternity? You
Exactly.
know? It's so fun. And they will promise you anything. They'll promise you worlds beyond worlds, to be your God, whatever you want, but only once you're dead.
Exactly.
Nothing when you're here.
Yeah, only once you're dead. It's genius. Oh, man.
It's so funny. It's just, what makes it extra funny is that when you're in it, you don't see it. You like let the world be pulled over your eyes for some reason.
Dude, there's this whole analogy, the last creature on the planet that ever experiences and understands what water is a fish.
Oh, okay.
It's the same thing inside of a cult. The last person on the planet to discover the cult is the person inside the cult.
Oh yeah, there's no order members that would call it a cult.
Yeah, because when you're in it, you just can't see it. It's not, dude, even when I left, like I didn't know what I was stepping out of. Like I didn't know if I was, like it took me a while to realize, actually I consider all of this fundamentalist movement and even Mormonism like kind of fucked up. And it took me a long time to really see it, because I had to get out of it far enough to then analyze it and be like, that's what I was in? What?
Oh yeah, that's so crazy. And it's like, I mean, you have time to kind of like cope with it a little bit, but it's shocking no matter what way you kind of like view it or end up leaving and stuff like that. It always just becomes such a shocker. But
it's fascinating that humans do this, that we're just so tribal and so like needing to be part of something, that things can just be nonsensical, but it just, as long as everybody's saying it and nobody's talking against it, it just can feel believable. And I think that could be with anything.
Yeah, but it's also like how if you want to convince yourself that you're not insane, just surround yourself with insane people. You know, it's like if you're around all the people that you are like exactly how you want to be, then you won't think you're crazy at all, no matter what the belief is.
Yeah, you see this outside of religion too. Like the more I've studied a little bit about what happened during the Holocaust and World War II, like I am not surprised at the atrocities that the German guards did, because it became normal. Like it became normalized that this is what you're supposed to do. And this type of thing, what's happening in the order, is happening right now in North Korea. Like with their leader, they have their prophet leader, but he's like the supreme ruler, or whatever he's fucking supposed to be called. He has a picture in every home. Do you guys have do they have a picture?
Oh yeah, every home in the world has a picture of the prophet.
So that you start to like deify, you turn this person into like this divine thing while they're still alive, and it feels special, and it's crazy, the control. And like I look at North Korea and I'm not surprised, because I've seen it, like I've lived it, I've felt it. And so when I see a leader controlling everything, and on some levels a little bit of Russia with Putin, because he really is careful with like crafting the narrative of what happens with the state media and everything, but it feels so similar. And how when you have the narratives being controlled and you don't allow for anything to give you pushback, you can get a group of, like, you can think anything.
Exactly.
So how do you make sure you're not slipping into cult-like thinking? Well, you have to look at what your group, whether it's a yoga group or a political group, like you need to look around you and see how you think differently from those you agree with. Notice what I just said. How you think differently from those you agree with, because everybody has nuance, and you need to, like that. If you can do that, then you can truly, it becomes a safeguard if you can have that. Now, if you want to go super ninja, then look at your opposite group So if we're talking politics, look at your opposite group and find something you agree with in them.
Yeah. I like that. That's a really good way of thinking.
And if you really want to, and if, along those same lines, find something with your group and see something you disagree with. If you do that, like right now, what we see in the world is a lot of people are learning about the other side from their side. Like people are talking about the other side, and like they're not even willing to walk to them or to go to their news channels. Like they're learning about Democrats from Fox News. They're learning about Republicans from CNN. Like one thing that I've always said is, I don't care what somebody believes, but I care about how somebody got there.
Yeah, I love that.
Like, I have so much more respect. Like, I want to see somebody that's super conservative, but believes in abortion. Like, I would rather that. Just like on the left, I would rather see somebody that's like full, like for women's rights and like leftist things, but thinks everybody should have a gun. Like I like that flexibility, that nuance.
I love that. That makes me think of, I heard someone say that it is so much more important, a way bigger deal of why you do what you do rather than just what you do.
Totally.
You know? I feel like that's extremely important.
Yeah, so I think that's a big deal. You got to be able to find your individuality in those different things. Like I'm so allergic to dogma. Like I was talking to somebody and they were talking about some opposing political person that they don't disagree with, and I said, we're gonna have a long conversation. I asked the person, I was like, what do you like about this political person? What do you like about her? And he said, oh, there's absolutely nothing good at all.
Wow.
And what that tells, like, I can't have that conversation.
That shows that they're completely biased, right?
You're so biased. Like, this is a horrible thing to say, but even like Hitler liked a certain, or maybe he played an instrument. Like he was able to like love him or hate him. He did atrocious things, but he freaking was charismatic when he spoke. You can find something, right? Yeah. And so if you can't, then you're getting sucked into the narrative, and you don't even realize it. You think that you're just like one of my guilty pleasures a few years ago was to study flat earthers. I was so fascinated with what could get somebody to believe the earth was flat. But when they're so locked into a narrative, they think, like, it feels like you're being unique because you're like, I believe this and everybody else believes that. But you don't realize, no, you're believing the same fucking thing that this group that you now identify with believes. What do you disagree with the flat earth buddies that you now are watching on YouTube? You know, what do you disagree with? What do you think, what is something you agree with on people that think the globe is round? Like find some individuality. Yeah,
I feel like that same thing you said with the flat earthers, I kind of did that with the moon.
Moon landing.
Yeah, the moon landing. How that's a whole conspiracy theory in and of
it's a whole podcast right there, getting into the conspiracy theories. I have a few things that I carry with me all the time, like done is better than perfect. That's a big one. You know, don't get so caught up in perfection. You know, join the CIA, as I say. That's just a fun line that I use in my book, Fish Out of Water. CIA stands for Consistent Imperfect Action. That's way better than just overthinking it. A mind full of conclusion has no room for expansion. You know, be open-minded enough that you can let new information in. And one life. Life is a big adventure.
You've even been able to do a YouTube video with Anthony Padilla. I think that is so cool. What was one thing that helped you to get onto that YouTube video?
Somebody that I told my stories to said, I'm going to connect you to this other YouTube channel called Jubilee.
Jubilee?
And this is actually what kicked it off. So I was on a YouTube channel called Do All Ex-Cult Members Think the Same? And so I was one of me and 4 or 5 other cult people to see if we all think the same. Okay. This was when I was super fresh out. I was so fresh out, I was afraid to even call my religion a cult. Like, I was like, I don't know if I would call it a cult, like, it's definitely different. Like, but one of Anthony's people saw that episode and then reached out to me, and Anthony, that interview with Anthony was awesome, because I debated if I was going to take that or not, because if I wanted to tell any of my story, if I just wanted to live my life and stuff like that, but I went with it, and him and his people, like it just made me so comfortable and open up about it, and they did such a good job. So it was kind of like the inspiration that has made me like continue it and even be here today. That's like,
That's so cool.
if there's any part of my life that can like empower someone to make their life, like I think some people probably feel trapped in something, different parts of life, whether it's a job or a relationship.
Oh yeah.
And so if my story of feeling trapped, maybe not caged, but psychologically caged, and doing it can like be at that spark for a person, then yeah, I'm all for it.
Nice. I'm so glad you did the video with him, because I watched the whole thing and I was fascinated by it. The story you told about your psychology class, the story of those cave people, like that was so cool.
Changed my life.
Oh man. What are some of the social medias that they can go and see more of your stuff on, and what are you trying to grow and work on now?
Yeah, so I'm Calvin Wayman everywhere. Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Calvin Wayman. I'm starting a podcast. It's called Cultured by Calvin Wayman, playing on the word where I come from and also just life experience, but I'm going to bring on a ton of fun people from all walks of life.
That's so cool.
And so if people want to get notified when that comes out, they can go to calvinwayman.com/podcast, and they can put their information in to get notified when that podcast goes live.
Nice. Okay. And then what about your comedy show? Because Amanda and I are very serious about going to that. I'm so excited.
Yeah, Jack Mormon Comedy Hour, April 29th in Boise, Idaho. That's going to be a ton of fun. If anybody's tied to Mormonism at all, it's
nice. And if anyone's around the area, go to it, because Amanda and I is going to be there too. Calvin's going to be there.
I'm performing.
It's going to be
there.
so fun. Yeah, that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, that'll be a good time.
I think that'll be cool. I wonder, I'll talk to Amanda about this, but we could try to make that be a little bit of a meetup with the Culty crew.
That'd be
get
so
a lot
fun.
of people to go.
Yeah.
So stay tuned, you guys. That would be awesome.
Thanks, bro.
Sweet. Yeah. Thanks for letting me do this. I think this was so fun. Watching you do it with Amanda, I had so many questions, so many things. I was like, I want to do one so bad. So, sweet, everyone. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye.
Yeah. Everybody knows that I'm breaking down. Everybody knows I ain't faking now. Everybody knows my heart's faking now. Yeah, she hates me now. I made mistakes, but now I don't ever wanna be alone. I don't really